You're listening to the Music Tech Teacher podcast, episode number 28. Welcome to the Music Tech Teacher podcast. Music tech tips, lesson ideas, advice, news, and interviews, especially for music teachers. Brought to you by midnightmusic.com.au. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Katie Wardrobe from midnightmusic.com.au, the place for music teachers to get the help they need using technology in music education. My guest today is Matt Ferrante, a music tech teacher from the Pittsburgh Science and Technology Academy, which is a STEM school where the motto is Dream, Discover, Design. They have a relatively unique digital-only arts program, which means there's no band or chorus or even a stage. Matt was involved in designing the curriculum and the music lab from scratch when the school first opened in 2009. And during our chat, we cover some of his favourite music tech student projects, plus the importance of mindfulness and meditation. I hope you enjoy the episode. Matt Ferrante is a music tech teacher at Pittsburgh Sci-Tech Academy, where he's been working for the past 7 years. He has a master's in music education and he's studied tech classes at Berkeley Online. He is also a professional saxophonist and plays the electronic wind instrument. And when he's not playing with music tech toys, you can find Matt playing golf, in which he sees many parallels between practicing music and golf itself. Welcome, Matt. Great to talk to you.
Good morning. Thanks for getting up so early.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
It seems to be a bit of a pattern here. A lot of people I'm interviewing are in the States, so it works better for them if they're, up at their time in the afternoon or evening, and I'm up early. But that's okay. I can deal with that. I'm a fairly early riser usually. And yeah, so it's great to talk to you. And I'm so interested to hear about all the things you've been doing, because you work at a really interesting school. So just start off by telling us about your school.
The school is called the Pittsburgh Science and Technology Academy. It's a STEM school, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And it was actually the brainchild of a student from Carnegie Mellon University. And when they thought about the music program, they wanted all of the arts to be totally digital. So both the art program and the music program are entirely digital in nature, which means there's no band, there's no chorus, there's no play, there's no stage. So the model is quite different. And for me, as a 25-year teacher, it was an interesting challenge, because part of the process was not only to interview for the job, but to actually design the curriculum. We had an $80,000 grant to buy all of the equipment for the studio, kind of sight unseen. So that was all part of the hiring process too. So just the way that it all got started was a pretty fascinating way to go.
That's
and now
amazing. Yeah.
Right.
And
right.
So, oh gosh, so many questions just from that one statement. Yeah, that's really fascinating. So I'm actually intrigued about the art program without having any, so are they not doing any practical, everything's digital, you said, so there's no painting as such or hands-on kind of art stuff in that manner, is that correct?
That is correct.
Wow.
But I mean, the art program is tremendous. And James Galker, he's my partner in crime. He's right next to me, and we collaborate on so many things, and our classrooms are very similar in how we run them as well. And there's art on the walls everywhere. The students do documentaries, they do Photoshop, they do all kinds of very deep things. But they have those sketch pads. I don't know what those are called, but they use those in terms of like hands-on info. Yeah. And they have an AP art class, but it's not. There's no clay, there's no kiln, so yep. It's a different model.
I love that. It's so interesting, because I think, I love doing art type stuff on, with my iPad, for instance, and it just makes it really portable. You've sort of got everything. It's a bit like music. I mean, you've got, your digital audio workstation in your pocket almost, maybe not pocket. iPad's a bit big for your pocket, but same thing with the art. So yeah, I find that really fascinating. And so is it a brand new school then? When you started, was it a brand new school at that time?
It was a school that was retrofit. It used to be a middle school called Frick. It was a French school. They closed the school down, shut it down for a year, did a complete update with money from the Gates Fund. And then as we entered in the first year, we were building curriculum. We only had a few grades. And then each year we kept adding a grade until we got to grades 6 through 12. So it took a few years before we were at full capacity. I think we're around 500 students.
Yeah. And tell me about the area in which the school's situated. You said it's an urban school. I mean, I wasn't familiar with what the term urban meant until I had contact with people, Facebook groups and that sort of thing. And I realised that I'm guessing it's a lower socioeconomic sort of area. Is that correct? Or
well, not necessarily. It's a magnet school. So in the States, we have these schools where there can be a magnet school for the arts, or a magnet school for language, or a magnet for whatnot. So this is the magnet STEM school. So anyone can apply to the school, but it's not based on socioeconomic or grades or whatnot. They can get in pretty much on a lottery, and then they just need to be able to stay in. So
right, okay.
But it's smack dab in the middle of Oakland, which is part of Pittsburgh that has the University of Pittsburgh. Carnegie Mellon is right there. So that's kind of part of our campus, is just having these areas right there. So it's in the middle of the city, but it draws from the entire city as a magnet school.
Yeah, right. Excellent. Yeah, we don't use that term either here in Australia, magnet school, but we would use specialist school, I suppose is the right term. But
sure.
We have some of those that are sort of specifically more music oriented, and they, have special programs there and that sort of thing. So that's fabulous. And so you haven't convinced them to put the A in STEAM for the title of the school, for the focus of the school. A lot of people I know are very passionate about, STEM came along and it was the science tech, stuff without the A in it.
We've had those conversations, and it just hasn't happened. But the first principal, he had his own band. The current principal, he's a bass player. The vice principal that just left, he plays the guitar. So they're very supportive of the arts. We never feel like we're second-class people. The classes are mandatory in grades 6 through 8. So they'll see us every day for a quarter for an hour and 20 minutes.
Excellent.
Which that just leads to incredible time with the students and a way to progress that I didn't see anywhere previously.
Yeah, I love that longer time. I think it's hard, isn't it, tossing up between whether you see them for a longer period over months versus longer, individual class times. And it's so much you can do in an hour and 20, did you say? Hour and 20 minutes?
Hour 20, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really good time, because I find, with shorter times, by the time you've set up stuff or kind of launched programs and things, that can take up a good 10 or 15 minutes out of, your 40-minute lesson or so, and it gets harder to do the meaty stuff of the lesson. So that would work really well, I would imagine. Excellent. And so the rest of the school, tell me about that. So everybody's very digital based then, with even the other subjects too, are they?
Well, the kids these days, I mean, they were born in an era of iPads. They don't know what it's like not to have a computer, not like me. I mean, I took to it as soon as I could, but it's just an extension. But to them, it's just part of life. So they're always teaching me as well. I always just try to stay a step or two ahead of them if I can.
Yeah, that's totally my philosophy all the time. People don't realise that. They think I'm, total expert in some things, whatever workshop I'm running. But that's the thing. I've also just stayed a couple of steps ahead by, looking at what other people are doing and playing with things. That's the important part, is the big playing, playing with whatever you're doing. So that's really good. So do they have individual devices at the school, the students?
Right. So when I set up the lab, each student has their own iMac, and each student has a 61-note Axiom keyboard. Each student has a set of headphones. I put in a Y jack so just we could do easy pair shares, or I could go in. They're all connected to a smart board, just where I can monitor what they're doing. They can kind of self-monitor, and I can just make sure they're on task, because a lot of it is just making sure that with middle school students that they're actually doing what you want them to do.
Yeah, and not sitting on YouTube watching videos or something.
Right. And YouTube is blocked. So, which is a good and a bad thing, because there are a lot of times I'd love to be able to have YouTube, but the IT department, and I've heard your discussions about them, a lot of the things that get in the way can be the IT department.
Yeah.
But I love you guys if you're listening. Yeah.
I know, yeah. I'm the same too. I'm always saying to people, go give those people chocolate and coffee and stuff, keep them friendly. But yes, I think the pedagogical side of things is not often matching up with what the IT people see is the right thing to do. So, and that's hard.
But when you've talked about some of the cloud-based activities, for a newer school, we have a real issue with the size of our internet pipeline. It's not that fast. So when I try to get the whole class on a program, there's one I haven't heard you guys talk about, but it's called Audio Tool, and the kids love it. It's got kind of like hip hop beats and stuff like that, and it's really cool and funky. But if I try to teach a whole class on it, it freezes every time. So all I can do is make it an extension for a couple of kids that might want to do it, but I can't have it part of the curriculum.
I've had that issue too in like say a workshop. I might have mentioned this on a previous episode, but there's a couple of websites which I find are like that, sort of more so, and I always describe them as sucking up more internet juice than other ones. Like Incredibox, which is a simple website.
Oh yeah, I love Incredibox.
Yeah, I love it too. I'm currently writing a few lesson plans for it, and it's great. Yeah, I love it. There's so much you can do with it, and the more I think about it, the more ideas.
I'd love to be able to take that and. I'd love to be able to take it and put it into GarageBand, take the audio.
You can now. This is part of the lesson plan I'm writing. So the online one, not the iPad app version, but the online version, you can actually download the WAV file. And they used to have this functionality. They brought it in after version, 2 or something, but it was a paid optional extra. So they were selling it like a ringtone, facility. So I was like, okay, well, fair enough, but what a shame. It would be awesome for educators to be able to download, some sort of WAV file or MP3. And so now I just checked it before running a workshop maybe a couple of months ago, and they've removed the payment part of that. So you can just download it. It's really cool. And so you can then, like you said, put it into GarageBand and add something over the top, your voice or instrument or whatever. But
that's tremendous.
Yeah. So check it. But that's one of those ones that sucks up more internet juice. So if I get a group of people on to Incredibox in a workshop session, I actually make sure that I get on myself first, because I know that out of 24 teachers, 23 or 22 are going to get on pretty much, and then the last couple of people just will not get on because it just makes it harder. So the internet speed is such an issue, and I often wonder, you've got IMAX, so that's, better than being Chromebook only, I suppose, because I always feel I wonder about those schools, whether if you've got Chromebooks in place, you also need to have that infrastructure to go with it, the good internet access and good speed. So it can be hard sometimes.
Right. I mean, for me, it was just crucial to sort of control the environment, especially with Logic Pro. I mean, I'm able to take all the downloads that are available. I put them on every machine, and that's kind of my workhorse program that I use. I start the sixth graders with GarageBand, which, if the newer interface looks just like Logic. Yeah. So when they transition from GarageBand to Logic, it's seamless. They say, "Oh, it's the same thing." I was like, "Well, let's look under the hood," and and it's a lot more powerful.
Yeah, some other cool stuff there.
It's a really nice transition for the students.
That's great. So, so GarageBand in grade 6, and then when so year 7 they transition to Logic at that stage?
That's what I do. I usually just start them right off in grade 7 with Logic. They just do an intro project. I usually teach them. I have them turn on all the advanced settings at once, just so that I'm kind of teaching everybody the same thing, and I don't have to remember to turn things on or off. That's just what I found works the best, because there are a lot of like advanced settings that can be on there, and that's how I run with it. So from 7th and 8th grade, they're working in Logic. And then in the high school, it becomes more of an elective. So in 6th and 7th and 8th grade, every class takes me for a quarter, an hour and 20 every day. And then in 9th through 12th grade, our high school, I have 2 electives. One's called music production and engineering, and the other one's music composition and arranging.
Excellent. Oh, that's great. And with the kids that are doing it as the elective, not the elective, sorry, the compulsory, 1, year 6, 7, 8, do they, what do you find that they do between your 1 quarter of time with them and, the next year when you see them? Are they continuing stuff on their own, at home and that sort of thing?
Well, what I like to do with them is I offer an activity called Mac Lab. It's always there, and the art teacher does it as well. So for the students that are interested in an informal setting, they can come down and they can just create music at their leisure a couple times a week. And even if they don't have the activity, it's really just an open door for this activity period. If you want to come down and work on some music, come on down. Some of them do it at home. It's not like we have music majors at the school. I mean, it's just it's a valued part of the curriculum, but I'm not teaching to a school full of music majors. That's a whole different thing. I mean, they love it. Some of them go into it, and then some of them don't, but still love it just as much as anyone I've ever seen. So
yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's great. I think you need to just open up the options for kids to access things. I mean, I guess some of them do have, devices at home where they can do their own thing, but I think it's great to offer them. I mean, you've got really high quality equipment at the school, so it's great that they've got access to that. It's really cool. And tell us about the sorts of projects that you do with those kids, the earlier ones, first of all. I'd love to talk a bit more about, I know we've talked a little bit before the interview about beat mapping and sampling, and I'm presuming you're doing that with the older students?
I do that actually starting in 7th grade. I'll get into that a little bit.
Cool.
Like when you're talking about Incredibox, which is always something that I just show them in 6th grade. It's just a warm-up activity that I do when I'm trying to show them how the human voice works. But if we would take the audio and bring it into Logic, then we would have to beat map it to get it to sync up with anything else that we would want to put in with any of the other loops or things. Yeah. Because I use a lot of loops. So.
And tell everybody about the beat mapping process. This is something I've done, in the past quite a bit. And like you said, as soon as you bring in some sort of external audio, which is not part of the loop library already, everything in the loop library is beat mapped, which means that when you use it in your project and you change the tempo, the loop will change with it. So it'll get faster or get slower, and it will automatically, it's like a piece of elastic, it will automatically adjust. But audio that you bring in from anywhere else is not beat mapped at first, and then you're kind of stuck with it at its tempo, and maybe it won't fit nicely with the drum patterns and things, or you've got the option of beat mapping, which will give it that elasticity, I suppose. That's the way I sort of describe it. So yeah, tell us about the process in Logic and how the students go about that.
I guess it depends on what the project is that they're doing. Like one of the projects I'll do is I'll give them some famous drum beats. I'll give them James Brown's Funky Drummer and a couple of like Led Zeppelin. Can't remember the title of the song, but I'll give them a couple of drum beats, right? And maybe they're just 2 measures long, but they're not beat mapped. Well, if they want to add on to them, then they have to beat map those 2 measures, and they have to make sure that it's exactly 2 measures and it's exactly on with the metronome. And then once they have that, then they can save it as their own loop and go from there. On a larger project, they might be taking samples from YouTube or other places. I'll put them up on Moodle or Google Drive or something like that. And they'll take different samples from various things. Well, then they have to beat map them just to combine them, So if they want to do like a mashup or something like that, put 2 different songs together, that's one of the other kind of projects that I'll do. So beat mapping it's just part of the process. It's a little bit clunky in Logic. A program like Ableton does it a lot smoother, but I have that program and it's just too hard for the kids, in a quarter-length class, I didn't have any success with it. So I love that program, but it just wasn't working.
Yeah, I used to use quite a bit Acid Music Studio because there weren't many options around, in the early days, which were sort of vaguely like GarageBand. So all the PC users were like, well, what can we use? So Acid Music Studio was kind of one of the only choices at the time, and it had quite a good beat mapping facility in it, and I miss that in GarageBand actually. You can sort of, you could open up something, bring your WAV file in, and sit there tapping in time. And, I got quite good at it. And you start to realize that the shorter the sample you're using, the easier it's going to be, because over time a song will get sort of further and further, not out of time, but it changes more over a longer period, so 2 or 3 minute worth of song. And using short samples was always a much easier place to start with, at least, and that worked quite well.
Yeah, and sometimes you can just get bogged down in the process of beat mapping it, because with Logic there are just so many different options as to how to do it. So it can get kind of cumbersome, but it's just something you have to do if you really want all of your other loops or samples or anything else you're bringing in to make.
Do you use the Who Sampled website with the students at all? Do you know that one?
I don't know that one.
Oh, it's so great. You've got to check it out because it basically, you can go to Who Sampled and you can look up a song. So I start with something that I know has samples. So I've looked up, something like Fatboy Slim, and I can't remember which one exactly that I've looked up, but if you go there and look up his song, underneath the song, it will tell you what are the samples in that song. So you can look down the list, and then you can click through on any one of those samples, and it will bring up a side-by-side YouTube video view of the Fatboy Slim song on the left and the sample on the right in its own YouTube video. And there's even a button which you can click which says, I think it says jump. So you can jump to the sample in the Fatboy Slim song, and then you can jump to the sample side by side in the other video, so the original sample as it is, and you can basically hear them. So it's amazing. You can hear the original sample, and then you can see what's been done to it in the song where it's been used. So has it been sped up or slowed down or changed key, or maybe nothing's changed at all. Just really cool. And then you can go back and then go through all the other samples as well. And then in addition to that, underneath, there's even a section where it says if the Fatboy Slim song itself has been sampled in other songs. So it's this whole, 6 degrees of separation thing. It's really cool. It's such a great website. But the thing I found really hard
check it out as soon as we're done,
Yeah. The thing I found hard is to find great examples that are G-rated, to play in class or workshops, because so many of the sample songs that use samples, they maybe the lyrics aren't quite what you would play for students in class. But that Fatboy Slim song's really good, and the Groove Is in the Heart, D-Light, that's a really good one too. It's got lots of samples in it, and you can hear them all. So yeah, fabulous. It's just a great resource. Really good.
The whole language thing, you could do a whole podcast on that. Because what the students listen to every day.
Yeah.
And then what we're allowed to do in school, they're just so vastly different, you know. And then you're always looking for the clean versions of stuff.
I know, and it's not always. I know. We have that rule. My own kids and I have that. We have that as a loose rule. I've sort of just given up because my eldest is really into hip hop. He just really likes it, and so I've just had to go. You know what? They're good kids. They don't use the swear words themselves. I said, as long as you're not using them yourself, we just have to accept that that's what it's like these days, because so many songs have explicit lyrics, and we do try and look for the clean one.
It's like getting a G rating for a movie. It's the kiss of death.
So
if you don't have an appropriate level of language in a song, the kids aren't going to go for it, if it's a certain genre. So
there's a few though that I've put my foot down on. I'm like, I don't think we need to hear that at 8 o'clock in the morning on the way to school.
Believe me, I have a daughter in 10th grade, so I know exactly what you're saying.
Oh, it's funny. And tell us about the sampling. You've used the beat mapping, so that's great, for samples that you've got to use. But sampling itself, and just explain for people who may not know about actually what sampling is, because I find terminology, that gets used in sort of music production classes, I find it can be a little bit ambiguous for people. And, like one example for me is the word loop or looping has different meanings. So you've got a loop library in Logic where you've got loops that you can use, but live looping is a completely different thing, where you're performing and you're creating loops as you go and singing or playing them and then building on that. So I think there's some, terminology which becomes difficult, but tell us about sampling then. So just explain for people who might not know.
I was just thinking that GarageBand will say cycle mode as opposed to
I
loop,
know, and that's another. Yes, I know, that drives me crazy actually, because I'm looking for the word loop, and I have to remind myself that the word that I'm looking for is not the word that's used in some software programs, and that drives me crazy.
but the sampler that I use in Logic, it's called the EXS24. And what you can do is you can take just a small clip of audio and you can assign it to a key on the keyboard. So. Or it could be yourself talking. Like I have things with my lessons where I'll say it's time to get back in your seats. And I say it so many times that it's just it's like C3 on my keyboard. So I have all these little commands that I say all the time that I just record, and then I put them into the keyboard and I say, my goal in 10 years is I never have to say anything. I'm just going to
awesome.
Play the keyboard.
I love it.
Just play the keyboard because it's funny, the kids think it's a hoot.
That's hilarious.
On a more serious level, you could take a small part of a song, could be some vocalese or a drum beat, and you can assign it to a key. And you can do what you want with the pitch or the tempo. You can add different effects, and then you can just play it in real time on the keyboard. Or you can even use musical typing and do it too, which, the keyboard thing is another one of those words we have to be careful with.
Yeah, no. Musical keyboard or computer keyboard, yeah.
So that's how to sample, that's what sampling is. And the Logic sampler, the EX24, it's a little bit clunky. It's not the best sampler out there, but it's like, Dr. Watson saying, GarageBand can do it all. Logic can do it all, just not the best. It's not the best way for everything, but it does have a really powerful sampler in there.
Yeah, that's great. I love sampling. I wish there was, kind of like a free one. I think I found a really basic one the other day, which was, fairly useful. But yeah, I'd love to have access to something that's not free because I want it to be free necessarily, but something that works for everybody. It'd be just great to show that functionality in workshops and things. But yeah, I love this. The act of sampling can be so useful. And there's lots of great artists that use it all the time. And, basically, I describe it as creating your own instrument from scratch, because you end up, you basically do that. You're either creating an instrument out of your voice or some other sound, or it could be a dog bark, or anything you like. But I do use the one in GarageBand app on the iPad quite a bit. That's useful. And you can do it's super basic, but, you can do a little bit there, and it just gives people the taste for it.
Yeah, I had the GarageBand app, and it was so different than the real thing. And I just kind of gave up on it. And I was like, I don't have to use it, so I don't. But I know tons of people that's all they have, and I guess I would learn it more, but I don't.
Yeah.
But one of the lessons, like when they're sampling or using loops from the loop library, which are also samples, like one of the lessons that I love to do with the students is to give me a project where everything that they do has to be modified in some way, shape, or form. So they're not just dragging stuff in and putting together something that automatically sounds good, but everything has to be changed some way, whether they're changing the pitch, they're changing, the timbre of it, they're adding effects to it, they're making it go in reverse, all those things that you can do.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. And do you get them to write that down? Do they have to tell you what it was that they did with each of the things?
Right. I've been doing, I love the notepad function in Logic.
Yeah.
So GarageBand has it too. So that they don't like to do, I don't want to do a Word document, Mr. Ferrante, but they'll, in Notepad, they can just say, well, here's what I did. Here are some of the changes that I made. And then when I do pair shares, it's the same kind of a thing where I'll have students put the headphones in, and they'll put their initials in, Susie Q, SQ, and they'll say, what they'll give some feedback on there as well. And then I have the students give me a screenshot of that when they turn it in, and I have them convert the files to MP3 and turn those in on Moodle at the end. So I'll have a picture of, what they thought they were and a song that they can use wherever.
Yeah, I'm always suggesting the screenshot thing too. I think it's very underrated, and I think some people just don't, some teachers don't realise that's an option really, because it's all very well to get an audio file, MP3 or something from the students, but you need to kind of see the breakdown of what they did and what it looks like. And you can often tell how good a project is by looking at it on a screen even before you press play, I think,
Sure.
If there's like regions in a wall from start to finish, it's not going to be a fantastic, interesting arrangement. And as soon as you can see some gaps, usually you go, yep, this is probably going to be kind of cool. And yeah, I think the screenshot thing is a great way to build up a digital portfolio of whatever it is they're working on. This episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast is brought to you by the Midnight Music Community. The Midnight Music Community is an online space for music teachers who'd like help using technology in their music lessons. There are online courses, video tutorials, lesson plans, music tech news, and professional development certificates are provided for any training that you undertake. I'm inside the community every day, personally answering members' questions and sharing tips and ideas. The best thing is that you get to connect with hundreds of other music teachers just like you and share your own experiences and occasional music tech frustrations. For more information and a special joining price just for the listeners of this podcast, visit midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. That's midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. And so when they submit it to you, so you're using Moodle, did you say?
Yes. So they would convert it to a Moodle. They would convert their Logic file or GarageBand file to an MP3. They would upload that on Moodle, and then I can
directly in there. Yep.
And then they'll just give me a screenshot. And then typically, what we'll do is we'll share some. I'll have a student say, "Give me a nomination of a project that you think the class should listen to. Either part of it or all of it really met the criteria of the assignment." And then with the screenshot, I'll be showing the screenshot, and then I can point to, let's look at this at measure 6. Where if it's just the audio, it's a lot harder, and the kids, they're going to look at their own computer screens, which are in front of them. So if I have the picture of the music up on the smartboard, then we can all take a look at it and analyze it a little bit better than just the audio file.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I know you mentioned, we, in an email that we shared, that you do some another project with some MIDI files, and they're looking at the form and remixing them using different sounds. It's another project that I've done too. So tell us about that one. I like this project. It's good.
I was loving your podcast today on movies. And you gave me a lot of great ideas, right? And I was like, oh wow, that's so much better than how I do it. But I always do trailers, and I was like, well, I do trailer 2 ways, and you said, well, I do trailer 5 ways. I was like, or movies 5 different ways. I was like, holy moly! So. But with the MIDI files, MIDI files have their limitations, but they can also be great in that you can really see what all of the instruments are. So I'll go to Cool MIDI is one. There's the MIDI archives. There's a whole bunch of them in various states of Electrofresh, I think, is another one. But the students will download the song of their choice. And here I can say it doesn't matter what the lyrics are because there aren't going to be any lyrics on it. And that always gets them excited. But then what they're supposed to do is I'll have them remix the song in some way, shape, or form. And then I'll have them, I love to do the colors in Logic where, the intro is orange, the verse is blue, all the verses are blue, the choruses are green, so that they can visually see what those are. And then they'll use that arrangement track in Logic, and GarageBand has it too, just to show the form. And then just somehow they have to rearrange it as well. And some of the more advanced students, they might just want to go ahead and put their own audio on it. And we have a little recording studio in the back where they could just simply transfer the files, go into the back room, and it's totally, pretty much isolated, and they can go back there and work on that as well.
Yeah, that's great. I think it really opens up a lot. I think the good thing about MIDI files is it gives the kids a jump start on, they don't have to sit there and enter all the notes for something first. They get to jump ahead to, the next stage, which is, like you said, analysing form and that sort of thing, because the notes are already there in the MIDI file, and then they can change them. And I've done things where, even just really simple things where, choosing a classical style MIDI file, and then bringing it into whatever software you're using, and even just changing the tempo and the playback sound. So rather than strings, which sound really bad in a MIDI file anyway, getting them to change them to some other instruments, completely different instruments, and rearranging them that way, and then, chopping things up and moving things around. That's always good too. But yeah, there's so much you can do, I think. Really, really cool. And so accessible. So many places, like you said, that have MIDI files that you can download, and they're small and easy to download, which is a nice thing.
And what I've always wanted to be able to do, and I've never quite figured it out, like there are these files that are out there. I have one of Stevie Wonder's Superstition, and there's some 9 Inch Nails files where you'll have every track. Yeah. Like I have all the original tracks of Stevie Wonder, and I can give it to the students and say, do something with it, but it's never quite worked for me as well as a MIDI file because, there are limitations of the sounds of MIDI. But if you have all the audio, it's just not an easy thing to do.
No, it's quite difficult. I've done some playing around with that too, and yeah, it can be, and that's where the beat mapping comes in again. But it can be quite difficult, and I think it's hard also when you have the sound of the song in your head. With the original audio tracks, the sound of the person is there and the original way the song was, and it's kind of hard to think outside the square a bit. But with the MIDI file, as soon as you change a playback sound of one of the tracks, it instantly becomes something different, and it's easier to reimagine, I think.
I like how you say outside the square instead of outside. We would say outside the box.
I do say that too. Maybe it's because it's early.
No, you've said it before, outside the square. I like it.
I think I use them interchangeably. I'm sure that's a thing, isn't it, as well? Maybe it's not at all.
perhaps in Australia.
Yeah.
I do have two didgeridoos over here that I cannot play at all. But I always into my class. That's as close as I get to knowing
think there are a few people here who also have didgeridoos that they cannot play. I have a friend who did learn how to do the circular breathing, and he can do it adequately because it's all about the circular breathing. And
I can circular breathe on the soprano saxophone. And I've always wanted to get a great didgeridoo sound on the iwi, the electric sax that I play, but I've yet to get it. So I'm still working on it.
Yeah, that's a big call. And I just want to finish by asking you let me know that you're into mindfulness and meditation, and this is kind of like a big area of interest for me. Over the last couple of years, it's something that I've been really looking into, and I think it's partly because I'm around technology all the time, and I really find there's a need to be away from it because my brain starts to go a little bit weird, and it's hard to concentrate and all that sort of thing. I mean, I go running a lot. That's the thing I really like to do the best, and running is sort of a type of meditation or mindfulness in a way, because when I'm out there, I used to, when I first started running years ago, I used to run with headphones on and listen to a podcast or music or something, but I've really moved away from that. So I'm often going on 2 or 3 hours of running without any headphones at all. And that's because of the mindfulness aspect. And I like to take in the sounds of the trees and the birds and the, even cars driving past, and be amongst nature and just sort of take it in that way. So, and that's part of being mindful. And so tell me about, do you practice meditation regularly then?
Probably not as regularly as I would like to, but a lot of times in school, when I can get a short break and just, do a 5-minute, 10-minute meditation, it just puts me in such a better place to be a better teacher. Just to take those breaks in the course of a day, because the population, they're a pretty good bunch of kids, but everybody has their days, teachers included, students included. So to be able to use mindfulness as a way to just come back to center, or come back to being grounded. I ended up taking about an 8-week class several years ago with my wife, and it just kind of set me on that path. And I try to do it, once or twice a day, but also to take those breaks too is really important. It doesn't have to be long.
No, that's what I found too. And I think when I first started looking into it, it was so mysterious. I just didn't get it. I just couldn't understand what is that, what is meditation, what qualifies as meditation. But it's, the more you look into it, you realize it's not complex. It's actually just sit and be and, take things in and bring yourself back to center, like you said, all the time. And I ended up looking into a couple of apps, which were quite helpful. So the Headspace app was really good.
Yeah, the Headspace is great.
Yeah, that was a really nice way to start. Very gentle, non-threatening, non-mysterious. Yeah, really good. So if anyone's interested, I'll put a link to that in the show notes because I did find that really useful.
But in some ways, it is good to just totally get away from. I used Headspace for a while, and then I just decided to just be away from all technology because, even just looking around, I have my cell phone, I have my laptop, I have another laptop, I have a Zoom. There's always stuff beeping and
buzzing in the background.
Yeah, so you just have to take that time consciously away from it all, especially as technology teachers. I think it's crucial to have that time from it.
I often wonder about the effect of all the technology on the body just generally, because I find myself getting quite stressed without realizing it. It's that background humming noise from whatever, lights, computer, anything. I've got a printer. It's a few years old, and it's the most annoying sound in the world if you leave it on. If you print some pages, whatever, I have to remember to turn it off instantly because although it's not making a loud noise, there's just this weird hum, and it actually emits a very high-pitched kind of sound. and my hearing is still good enough that I can hear that sound. And after a while, I'm sort of not aware of it for a while, and then I'm tuned into it, and I'm like, what is that annoying thing? And, the printer's on still. Go and turn it off. And then I'm like, that's so much better. So, yeah, I think getting outside and getting away from everything every now and again is really important. And like you said, it makes you a better teacher or better whatever you're doing, better parent, it just really helps. So happy to give everyone the tip of doing that and just, taking a little bit of time out from what you do, whether it's technology related or not, and just sitting and, taking things in. Nature helps a lot, I find.
Absolutely. Well, that's why I like golf so much. It's kind of a walking meditation, in a way, or a good walk spoiled.
And that's, yeah, that's what I would say. My dad's totally into golf. He loves golf. So, and he's a musician too, top musician. So he could totally relate to you, I think, and and do that. But yeah, I think he finds it that way too. But, and for me running, some people, the purists about meditation and mindfulness might say that you should not be doing anything when you're meditating. But I do find that it is totally possible, with the running and just sort of taking that time out. It's great.
Well, there is walking meditation. I mean, it's part of a practice that I do is just a walk. But you're not really doing it. It's not really you're not doing anything there. It wouldn't be golfing. You'd just be kind of just
walking. Back. Yeah, which is perfect.
In a circle.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, that's good. I could see that being good too. So good to talk to you. Thank you so much, and love hearing about everything that you're doing. I'm loving chatting to all these different people about the things that people are doing in class with students, and everyone's doing in some ways similar things, but then quite different things too. So I'm really hoping that others listening are getting some great ideas for their own classes and learning from each other.
I've been enjoying it immensely. So I appreciate you having me on. Just someone who's a blue collar teacher, blue collar musician in the trenches with the students day in and day out. So it means a lot. So really
you're welcome. No, it's great. It's totally great. And I think that's what other people want to hear about. They want to hear about normal, regular teachers, not, people who are, I don't know.
Maybe normal.
Well, yeah. Okay. Maybe not normal. You know what I mean, though? Just people who are like them, who are trying things out. And I think with technology, a lot of teachers are afraid to try stuff, but also they wouldn't consider themselves an expert, that could come and talk on a podcast. But whatever you're doing, if it's working, then it's great. And it's, that's a great opportunity to share it with other teachers, because it doesn't have to be complex and, involved. It can just be simple. And if it's working with kids and getting the results that you want, then it's a good thing.
Well, that's the most important thing. But, you're having people whose books I have behind me on your show. I'm like, oh my God, it was a little intimidating. So,
don't be intimidated. I'm glad you did it anyway. Thanks so much, Matt. We'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye. The Music Tech Teacher podcast is hosted by me, Katie Wardrobe. You can find more information and links from today's episode at midnightmusic.com.au/28. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.